We all struggle with feeling like there's not enough time in the day to be productive personally or professionally. We all struggle to make our time matter. It's time to take control. It's time to start investing in the corporation of you. At Athena, they've helped over 700 ambitious professionals achieve more by connecting them with best-in-class, globally remote executive assistants. Athena executive assistants go beyond basic administration tasks. They help you make time matter through the art of delegation. They believe delegation is the superpower of all highly successful people, and your personal EA will help you get there. Your EA is a one-on-one long-term partner to help you achieve your personal and professional goals. Take back your time. Join the waitlist at athenago.com. That's athenago.com.
I mean, no one plans to get sick, and yet, here we are. My name is Matthew Zachary. A quarter century ago, I was given 6 months to live with a diagnosis of terminal brain cancer. For more than 15 years, I've been ranting and raving on the air about stupid cancer and now stupid healthcare, and I'm just getting warmed up. So let's all go make healthcare suck less together, because you know what? We're all out of patience. Hey, that's the name of the show. Hello, folks. Welcome back to Out of Patience. This is Matt. I got a good show for you today. My old friend, I don't mean old, like just like we've known each other a while, and she's super epic. Erin Moriarty Wade is a freelance writer in healthcare. She's a young adult caregiver to her daughter with an autoimmune disease. Her background is an on-air reporter and weekend anchor for several news stations, and she's been reporting on issues in healthcare ever since. Her middle child, Ansley, was diagnosed with a rare condition, took months to figure out. She's doing really well these days. You're going to hear all about that incredible story, but more along the lines of the whole conversation of healthcare communications. Does it work? How does it work? What does it mean? Can healthcare speak person? A common theme on Out of Patience. And life hacks for moms and dads when you go beast mode just to help ensure the welfare of your sick child. It's a really authentic conversation today, folks. Enjoy. Erin, welcome to Out of Patience.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
I've been looking forward to having you on the show for a long time. You and I go back a while, don't we?
Yeah, I think we're good Twitter buddies.
Yeah. I mean, I joined Twitter in like '08. I might have been like, I don't know, the earliest adopter I knew in healthcare, because I was running stupid cancer. Like, oh, what's this Twitter thing? Let's figure this out. And who knew?
That is early. Yeah. I'm not sure actually what year I got on there, but I didn't love it at first. And then I started really getting into it when I sort of found the healthcare community, and all of a sudden it like hit me that this was an amazing place to be.
Well, I want to start there. I don't get to talk to a lot of, weekend anchor, on-air reporter, journalist people on this show, whether it's former or current. So you have
another lifetime ago.
Yeah, but you have this incredible backstory perspective on communications, which, by the way, is what you studied. So you're one of those rare people that did what you went to college for.
Yeah, I guess so.
So I want to learn more about what it was like to get into journalism. And I mean, I've done live TV. I can't stand it, but to be an anchor, that's a lot of work, right?
Yeah, it was. That was a tough gig. And the interesting part about that was it was a very small market. So we did everything. We carried our own cameras. We shot our own stories. We edited our own video. It's called One Man Band. And it was a pretty intense experience, but it was a lot of fun and learned a lot. And then went back to being a newspaper reporter after a few years.
So we're talking today on the show, and you're used to interviewing people like me, not being interviewed by people like me. Channeling that inner sort of weekend anchor, there's an incredible TikTok channel of an anchor, a woman who holds like this fake microphone outside her kid's bedroom when he's crying and screaming. And she's like, reporting live right now. Tyler seems to be having a shit fit. Back to you in the studio.
Oh my God, that's so funny.
Does that happen? You just feel like you want to look into a camera that doesn't exist and ask the world to help you?
Probably many times. I think all parents need to call in for reinforcement sometimes.
So what were some of the things that you reported on back then?
Pretty much anything that happened anywhere at any time. It could be, a lot of crime and grime, also some plane crashes, school board meetings, taxes, elections, politics, really everything. Like with the markets I worked in television, we didn't have a beat or like a, assigned topic to cover. We were just sort of all over the place. Like you never know what could happen. But when I was a newspaper reporter, I covered healthcare. So I was focused on covering hospitals, physicians, pretty much anything that was happening kind of in that space in the city of Atlanta.
So we talk about how no one really cares about the sky falling on them until it does. And yet you were kind of working in the healthcare mediaverse, and then healthcare kind of landed on you.
Yeah, that's true. It was really weird. I mean, I spent probably the first decade writing about healthcare, first as a reporter in Atlanta, and then later working for hospitals, pharma, healthcare organizations as a content writer, just as a very healthy person who went to the doctor once a year for a checkup and really had no idea what it was like to face a serious illness personally. Then I sort of got a crash course when our daughter got sick in kindergarten, and I realized writing about something is very different. Interviewing people and writing about something is very different than experiencing it yourself. So I went from, maybe seeing a doctor once a year to being 4 to 5 times a week in the children's hospital and all of her different appointments, and really getting a really different perspective.
Did having that like investigatory DNA inside you come in handy?
It probably hurt me a little bit in the beginning because I have that personality. Like I keep digging and digging. And when we were on that typical diagnostic odyssey that you hear about with rare diseases, where you go from doctor to doctor, month after month, and nobody knows what the heck is wrong. During that time, I would, spend hours and hours searching, learning, researching. And that probably wasn't the healthiest thing for me. But I will say it did come in handy once when we had a pretty big snafu where we couldn't get some medical records from a hospital. And I really needed them because we had moved to New Jersey, and I needed these records for our first appointment with a specialist there. And it was, months had gone by, and I was being nice and doing everything correctly. And then finally I just like snapped and put in, went into reporter mode, made the phone calls to the executive offices and said, I need this tomorrow. And that was kind of the only time that really came in handy, I guess.
Well, we're going to get to it later in the show about when beast mode mom channels her inner career talents to get shit done. One of my dear friends. I feel like
you really know me.
Yeah, no, honestly, I do. And one of my dear friends who hosts a show on the OffScrip Health Network, Ilora Nanos, has been raising a son with narcolepsy for 18 years.
Oh.
But she's an attorney. Like a go fuck yourself attorney. And she'll turn on the attorney genes whenever she needs to actually just get things done. She goes full attorney beast mode whenever.
That's good.
And it comes in really handy to have the skills.
Yeah, good for her.
So is it true that if you're Dr. Googling with a background in journalism, you can kind of filter out some of the crap?
I think one thing that helped me was our pediatrician at the time, who's a really very kind and super intelligent, experienced pediatrician. He told me, don't just be searching on Google. Go on, if you're going to, because he knew I was going to do this, like go on at least Google Scholar and try to, he gave me some kind of pointers in that direction, which was a little bit helpful, but really it was just sort of a waiting game and process of elimination. And there was not a lot that I could do at that point.
So let's get to Ansley. She was your third?
She's our middle child. She's our second.
So let's get to that story, because I'm sure it's riddled with what's this and take you seriously and there's something wrong with her and misdiagnosis. Or were you one of the lucky ones that like kind of sailed through to here's what's going on?
I think we were probably a little bit of both. We definitely did not sail to a quick diagnosis by any means, but her symptoms were severe enough and noticeable enough that people took notice and took it seriously. There was never any, oh, it's just you're a worried mommy. That was not something that happened. So yeah, I think probably a little bit of both.
Yeah. So overall.
Yeah.
Right. It's kind of an, like the symptoms were so pronounced, they had to take it seriously, but at the same time, the symptoms were pretty serious.
Yeah. And also just very baffling and didn't make sense. And, her autoimmune disease started with like extreme swelling in her legs and her ankles. And it was very strange, obviously, but we went first to the pediatrician. There was nothing else wrong with her. She was a totally healthy kid. So we kind of, wait and see kind of a thing, came back, got worse. Then it started in her hands as well. And then somewhere along the lines, months kind of went by. We had ultrasound, we had blood work. We had a lot of basic things done. And then we were taking the kids to Disney for Thanksgiving. And I remember my husband went to give her high five and she couldn't open her hand. And her hand was like, kind of like frozen, almost like in like a claw position. So we, of course, both, quietly flipped out in our heads, tried not to overreact. But of course, immediately got back on the phone to the pediatrician in a panic and, more tests, waiting, more doctors. And then the final thing that kind of put everybody into a frenzy was she was taking a bath with her little brother and they loved to like play in the tub and horse around and make a huge mess. And she like stood up and I noticed she had her lymph nodes, or her inguinal lymph nodes, like by her kind of the line of her underwear had become enormous, like just overnight. She had like the size of like tangerines. So I then, of course, panicked even more. And then we got sent through another round of like infectious disease. And then we were sent for a lymph node biopsy because then, of course, the next fear was like maybe she has lymphoma. And so, yeah, it was a long process. But I think that's one thing I always remember is it gives me a good perspective, I think, is that I so vividly remember my husband and I waiting in the hospital room when she was sent off for the lymph node biopsy surgery. And they were going to tell us that day and they were going to, call to the room and say either it was cancer or it's not cancer. And it was, I guess, more than anybody, it's terrifying and horrifying. But to get a phone call that no, there's nothing cancerous there was something, that I'm always grateful for. Like I feel like that day our path was going to go one of two really different ways.
So was there any one particular conclusive test that eventually wound up happening that was a sort of concrete diagnosis?
Well, it's a clinical diagnosis and there's not like a genetic marker or anything specific that they can say you have this. It's more of a physician looking at like all of your symptoms, your blood work, like an overall picture of what's going on with you. So that was what we eventually got. But what was interesting, and, I felt very lucky because I had the healthcare background. We had excellent insurance. My husband works not in healthcare, but he works for a pharmaceutical company and kind of business innovation. So we had really the very good circumstances, but we still faced these crazy barriers. And I think how other families facing these barriers with more challenging circumstances must have been, incredibly overwhelmed and lost. And the example that comes to mind is we were told that, so if it wasn't lymphoma, thank God, then we needed to see a rheumatologist. And to get into a pediatric rheumatologist was going to be several months. And so the best way to do that, they said, was to catch one while we were in the hospital for the lymph node biopsy surgery. So
like with a butterfly net?
Exactly. That was the term, catch one. And I'm like thinking, God, we live in the 9th largest city in the US. We lived in Atlanta. We have a ton of hospitals, a handful of academic medical centers, and we have to try to catch a rheumatologist. Like, this is strange. So yeah. And that's something that I'm grateful that we had good circumstances, but I'm super aware that even with good circumstances, that time of diagnosis and getting access to treatment is full of all different kinds of obstacles.
I would have contracted Wile E. Coyote. If, Acme makes a lot of great products these days to capture people, I hear.
Well, so the cool thing is this was, 5-6 years ago now, but this past year, I got to work on a really great project with CARA. It's the Childhood Arthritis and Rheumatology Research Alliance. And I've been working on this physician parent work group. And it's, kind of an advocacy project that brings together physicians and families and tries to like really bring the patient and family voice into research. And it's been amazing. But one of the really cool things we did was a barriers to care survey. So we actually created a survey to try to learn what families face, like when they're trying to get access to care for this certain autoimmune disease. What do they face and how can we make it better? And so it was kind of full circle, I think, for me in that way.
Who knew that actually having parents talk to the doctors would help the situation?
Exactly.
It's so bizarre because I talk about it this way, and you're going to nod your head on the radio here, but healthcare is kind of a supply-only economy. We don't kind of pre-research getting in there for all the wrong reasons, and you're at the mercy of a system. But like at the end of the day, you're not even the end user. Your daughter's not the end user. The doctor's the end user. So how do you make autonomous decisions when you're not even able to talk to the other end user, which is the doctor, right?
Yeah, it's definitely very convoluted, and you feel sometimes very trapped.
Yeah. A toast to healthcare communications.
Yes, cheers.
Yeah, I'm really excited that you had the opportunity to help be a part of this work group. It sounds obviously very necessary. Were there any like immediate aha moments, like how did we not do this before, or was this currently already like fomenting in some way?
So the absolutely wonderful pediatric rheumatologist at Hackensack University, Dr. Suzanne Lee, who is really the one that saved Ainsley's childhood, she was on it and she asked if I would like to be a part of it. And of course I was thrilled and said yes. So that was kind of how that happened. But I think they've been doing this for years. They're very extremely progressive about doing that kind of work with families and physicians together.
We'll be right back after the break.
Has your chronic illness made it difficult to continue working in the traditional way? Want to learn how to find and create flexible remote work that both accommodates your chronic illness and generates an income? Join the Patients Getting Paid membership, a community of chronicpreneurs where people just like you find workshops and trainings, weekly updated condition-specific gigs, twice monthly coaching calls, co-workings, accountability, and the kindest community to support you on your path to make money while working from anywhere and taking good care of yourself. Learn more or join us at patientsgettingpaid.com.
All right, we're back with Erin Moriarty Wade. I think it's fair to let the listeners know that Ainsley is doing fantastic these days, correct?
Yeah, she's doing pretty well. She still has some joint pain and she has some skin issues as well from her autoimmune disease. It's a form of scleroderma, by the way. I don't know if I mentioned that. But she does horseback riding a couple times a week, and she does ice skating, and she goes to school, and she got her COVID vaccine and then found out that her body did produce antibodies, which we were super excited about because with the chemotherapies and immunosuppressants, a lot of people, their bodies don't produce antibodies after getting the vaccine, but she did. So win-win there.
Definitely. And honestly, I've done a lot of work, this already, when little kids are subject to all these medical things, it's a managed situation that they thrive through adolescence and puberty and young adulthood. And I'm sure this is like you're setting up the stage for this understanding that this is something that has to be observed.
Yeah, for sure.
I want to read a quote from your article, Surviving Then Thriving, from 2018. I love this. It's poetry. You said, "This isn't the childhood we envisioned for our daughter, but then I try to remember the quote, life isn't about waiting for the storms to pass. It's about learning to dance in the rain." Was that yours or you stole it?
Oh, no. That's a famous quote. It's a quote I read somewhere. It hit me that night because she was out there dancing with her dad and she was like tearing it up in her little red cowboy boots, even though she physically felt pretty shitty.
God, you gotta love kids, right? They are the cause of and solution to all of life's problems. So let's get into what you're doing these days, because you are now an informed writer. You've been through the ringer and Has it changed your perspective? I'm sure it has, but to what extent? And what are you most passionate about writing these days, or who are you working with?
Yeah. So the past 2.5 years, I've been working as a content specialist at My Tomorrows, and it's a company that helps patients and physicians find and access clinical trials and other treatment options like expanded access programs. And it's been a really great experience for me. One of kind of the highlights of my work there is interviewing patients and physicians and understanding the patient's journey, the family's journey, what they went through. And it's something that I professionally, that's what I do, but also personally I can relate to because I do personally know what that's like.
Have you ever read the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?
Oh, no, I don't think.
All right, it's irrespective, but there's a it takes place in the future or some kind of weird other alien universe, but there's some kind of like species that you stick inside your ear and it lets you hear other languages in your native language called a babblefish.
Oh, cool.
So I feel like I use it as a metaphor all the time, like you're kind of a human babblefish that's translating the absolute ridiculous acronym jargon of science and research to average human beings. Is that fair?
Yeah, maybe on some levels. And I think also just being able to bring the stories to life of what patients and families go through, I think is also important. And I think one of the things I've learned that's been really interesting is how, a lot of times people don't know that there are other options that they can look for. And just, there's been quite a few patients that I've interviewed that have said this, but the one that comes to mind most recently, a family that I interviewed this fall, and the mother had been diagnosed with metastatic pancreatic cancer and just told, sorry, we can't really do much, but here's a referral for palliative care and we'll maybe try chemo, but, nothing we can do. But the interesting part is her husband is a physician, her daughter is a physician, her son is also a physician. And they all said, wait a minute, let's go look for clinical trials. Let's go see what is happening in research, what else is out there. And so My Tomorrows was able to help them look for treatment options and ultimately help them access something. And 2 years later, their mom is feeling really good. She's doing yoga. It's not what you would have expected. But it's also, it's a little bittersweet because it's sort of this inherent privilege rolled in there of, well, they knew to ask and they knew to keep looking because they were doctors. And, what about all the other people that have no idea that that's even a choice or how to go about it or how to look for it or how to access it?
Yeah, I've talked about the chutzpah factor on the show forever. That not everyone's born with moxie, and not everyone is a doctor, and sometimes it's just good and bad luck. But I feel like healthcare communications or marketing communications can be jargon by agencies. It could be skewed by going to cdc.gov or whatever. But what you're doing is a service. It's an intervention. It's a navigational way to humanize the fact that no one wants to be there, but give them confidence, hope, maybe some moxie, maybe some chutzpah, because you're able to talk to them like people, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And the cool thing about our model is that we use patient navigators. So we have people who have a medical background, our chief medical patient navigator was a former physician. And, they all have training and they speak 8 different languages and they know how to help people walk through this process and explain things in a way that is patient friendly and easy to understand. And so that's a really important part of it too.
So let's go into the mom and dad beast mode life hacks, right? Something I'm Gen X. I think you're in the same census checkbox as me, more or less. And a lot of the listeners are of our age, and we're dealing with our parents and our kids. And if we get sick or our kids, it's like with the sandwiched universe out there. Yeah. Raising kids is hard enough when they're not going through all sorts of crap. Were there any specific tips, tricks, life hacks, stress relief, relationship mitigations that you and your husband found highly valuable but unexpected that you could share with people listening?
Oh, gosh. I think one of the things for us that was helpful was that our younger son was too little to really know what was going on, but our older son was just an absolute trooper. And he would, we had to do like once a week, I had to give Ansley a shot of methotrexate that wasn't fun, obviously, but that would also make her really sick. And so he would come and sit with her, and he would find something funny on YouTube, and he would bring her candy. And I think having that like sort of family support when someone's sick is really important. Like, even if, a kid's technically too young to really be carrying that responsibility, if they can, I think it's really helpful. And it's kind of amazing to me how kids just in that situation are like, they know how to kind of support and reach out to each other. Like, so the year, first grade, this was kindergarten when Ainsley got sick, but then first grade, we were living in New Jersey, and one of her little classmates was diagnosed with cancer, with lymphoma actually. And it was obviously, horrendous, but he was also terrified of needles. And his mom, when I reached out to her, she said that was an issue. And so, so Ansley had the idea, like, I'm going to make a video, I'm going to show him, like, I do my shots and I do my IV. And so over the next few weeks or whatever it was, she made one of, this, here, mommy's going to give me my shot. It's not that bad. And then we were also in a phase of doing a IV. We would start at the hospital and then we would bring it home and have home infusion. And so she had 2 days at home doing that. And she made another video of herself showing him, and giving him some tips, and it makes a yucky taste in your mouth. So make sure your mom gives you lots of candy. You need Sour Patch Kids and lollipops. And, it was really sweet. And at the time, moving to me as a mom to see that she was feeling pretty shitty, but she was going to do this to help her classmate. So that was kind of cool.
That's extraordinary. That's really extraordinary. All right. So you have 3 kids. I have twins. Do your kids get along?
Sometimes. We have a boy, girl, boy. So it's kind of a funny dynamic. But yeah, our older 2 are really close. Our son and Ainsley, they're only 3 years apart, and they're pretty close. So we're grateful for that.
Yeah, my twins are cresting toward 12, which we know that's kind of the weird stuff is beginning to start. And I love just comparing notes with other parents whose kids are either on the way.
Is that 5th grade for them, or are they 6th grade?
They're in 6th. They're finishing up 6th.
Okay, same as Ainsley. Yeah, that's a tough year. You go from being little kid romper room in elementary school to all of a sudden the tween teen stage.
Yeah, and honestly, this is a time. This show will air in a couple of weeks from taping, which is early March now. But the relevancy is that COVID impacted so many kids behaviorally because they kind of skipped a year and a half of school. But my kids were twins, and they kind of weren't as impacted by that developmental challenge. They were together. But yeah, they went from 4th grade to 6th grade, and and they're still kind of what's all this? What's middle school? Meanwhile, when we were in middle school, we're still in 1st grade. Middle school today is high school back then.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's very different. Yeah, that's a tough age.
I want to wrap because I had a great quote, and I think this is kind of a summary executive of everything we stand for. It's patient experience begins long before you meet the doctor. But who invented the term patient experience? It's just what agency put those words together? It's the shit happens stuff, right? But you're living in the space. You were in that space. You've learned this space. What does that mean, patient experience?
Well, I think it's about everything that patient goes through. It's not just the hour that they're in the doctor's office or the day that they're in the hospital infusion center. It's everything that leads up to it. It's the appointment. It's do you know how much things are going to cost when you get there? Do you have the money to pay for it? Do you have a way to get there? Do you have childcare for the hours and hours that you're going to be gone? It's that whole overall picture of what a person goes through.
Yeah, and then it ain't over when it's over.
Yeah, no, because then the next day, when Ainsley does her IV, the next day she's homesick. It's one day is we pull her out of school early, we go to the children's hospital, I set up shop work in the infusion center, and then the next day she's doesn't feel well and she stays home.
Is this just ongoing, or is there a bit of an end game for Ansley?
They'd hope that she would be in remission by now, actually, but she's not. But she's, it's managed, and she's very, for the most part, able to do what she wants and needs to do. So,
well, she's got a baller mom and a baller dad.
And also, it's good that you had this timing because I don't know if you know this, but it's Autoimmune Awareness Month. So, got to give a shout out for that and all the other families dealing with autoimmune disease.
That is true. And it was Rare Disease Day like 2 weeks before this taping. So,
yeah, that's true. That's true. That was
we got to call them out when they're out, and it really matters. All right, Erin Moriarty Wade, you didn't get to channel your inner news anchor voice. I'll forgive you for this one, but I expect it on the next time you're on the show.
Okay, I'll dig up some old reels for you.
Yeah, freelance writer who's writing focused on topics in healthcare. Healthcare landed on her and her family. As a reporter, she's covered everything from AIDS, Southeast Asia, hospital competition in Atlanta. She does writing for healthcare organizations and is currently working for the Childhood Arthritis and Rheumatology Research Alliance. Lots of acronyms, CARRA. We'll put a link in the episode description. Anything else? You are on Twitter at, what is it? E. Moriarty Wade. We'll put that link in the description as well. What do you tweet about?
Mostly healthcare and sometimes my crazy children and my unruly dog.
I'll allow it. Fantastic. Erin, thank you so much for coming on Out of Patience.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It was really a pleasure to talk with you and an honor to be on your show.
That's all for now. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review on Apple Podcasts, follow us on social, and tell all your friends to listen. Tell us what you'd like Matthew to cover in his next episode by leaving a message for us at 855-AUDIO-66, and we might just use it in a future show. Out of Patience is a product of OffScrip Health. We are a healthcare engagement company built for patients and caregivers by patients and caregivers. Our executive producers are Matthew Zachary and Andrew McDowell. Our senior producer is Betsy Shepard. Our host is Matthew Zachary. It is recorded, mixed, and edited by Betsy Shepard. For advertising and media inquiries, email media@offscrip.com. That's media@offscrip.com. For more information, visit offscrip.com.